So, hi guys, how are you? Hope you people are doing well. Even I am fantastic. In the today's class, we'll be revising SAE 3402, that is Standards on Assurance Engagement. Basically, here this will be dealing with assurance report that the auditor provides on controls of the service organization. Now, this service organization concept we have already discussed in SA 402. I'll once explain you the background of this standard. Now, generally, let's say there is a company, Reliance Industries. Now, Reliance Industries, it has outsourced one of its activity. Let's say payroll activity. This example I have told you while discussing SA 402 as well. So, payroll activity has been outsourced to a service organization. Why you are calling this as a service organization? Because it is providing outsourced service to Reliance Industries. Here Reliance Industries will be user entity because it is using services of service organization, right? Now the auditor, while performing audit of this user entity, he will require to verify the controls with respect to payroll activity, right? In the with respect to this employee expenditure and with respect to various other expenditures that will be present in payroll, like PF contribution, ESI, okay, various employee related expenditure, all this they will be coming under payroll activity. Now this payroll activity, it has been outsourced. Now the auditor of Reliance Industries, while verifying this employee related expenditure, he will also have to verify the controls around this payroll activity. But the controls, they are not present in Reliance Industries, they are present in service organization. Okay, with respect to this payroll activity, since it has been outsourced to the service organization, there will be controls in the service organization. Okay, controls around the payroll processing will be there in the control in the service organization. Now, just like service organization is providing service to Reliance Industries, it will be providing service to various other companies. Okay, there will be various clients to service organization. Now if auditors of all those clients comes to service organization to verify controls that the service organization is maintaining, then that would not be possible. So what service organization will do is, it will appoint a service auditor. This is service auditor. He will express his assurance. Okay, he will express opinion on the controls that the service organization is uh, maintaining. So here the service auditor, after verifying the controls of the service organization, he will issue report. There will be two types of report: type 1 report, type 2 report, that we have discussed in SA 402. These reports, they will be sent to user entity auditors. Okay, so based on those reports, user entity auditor will rely on the controls at the service organization. Now the service auditor, here he is performing an engagement, right? He is verifying the controls at the service organization. For this engagement, okay, for this assurance engagement, here, since service auditor is providing assurance on the controls of the service organization, we call it as assurance engagement. Okay, for this assurance engagement, SAE 3402 will be applicable. Hope this is clear. Now this is service organization is there na, it will prepare a document known as description of system at service organization. Okay, this description of system at service organization is a specific document that will be prepared by the service organization. What will be there in this description of system? It will contain what services the service organization will provide, and with respect to those services, what systems it has implemented, what processes are there in the service organization, and with respect to those processes, what controls have been implemented, okay, how the controls have been designed in the service organization, and how the controls have been implemented in the service organization, and how those, okay, with respect to operating effectiveness, it will not be there in the description of system, okay, just how the controls have been designed and implemented, all these aspects with respect to controls of the service organization will be described in the description of the system. Now generally, whenever any user entity comes to service organization asking for a service, the service organization will share this description of system document with the user entity. Now user entity, it will just like that, it will not believe on that description of system. So along with this description of system, service organization will also share the report that is issued by the service auditor. So the service auditor, he will check whether the actual system that is present in the service organization is as per the description of the system or not, okay, whether actual system with respect to controls in the service organization has been fairly presented in the description of the system or not, that the service auditor will check and he will give the report. Hope that is clear. This is the background of this SAE 3402 and how SAE 3402 and SA 402 are linked. SA 402, it will be dealing from the user entity aspect, okay, from the user auditor point of view, the SA 402 deals with, okay, whenever user entity uses a service organization for any of its activities with respect to financial activities, how the user auditor has to consider this, okay, what considerations the user auditor has to take into account, that aspect will be dealt by SA 402. Hope that is clear. And this SAE 3402, it will be applicable in this particular situation. However, there are certain two situations in which this SAE 3402 will not be applicable. What are those two situations? First situation, now service organization, apart from having controls with respect to the services that it provides to the user entity, it will also be having its own controls, like it will be preparing its financial statements. With respect to preparation of its own financial statements, there will be certain controls. With respect to processing the payroll of its own employees, there will be certain controls. Now if service organization appoints any auditor to provide assurance on the controls of the service organization itself, okay, not with respect to the controls related to services that the service organization provides, but with respect to the controls that the service organization is having with respect to itself, okay, if for such assurance the service organization appoints any auditor, then for that type of engagement, SAE 3402 is not applicable. Hope that is clear. That is the first situation. And the second situation in which SAE 3402 is not applicable is, see, the user entities, they will also be outsourcing some other activities which are not which will not be having any impact on the financial statements. Like let's say for example, Reliance Industries outsources manufacturing activity, okay, manufacturing of a particular product has been outsourced to A Limited. Now, with respect to this manufacturing service that A Limited provides, with respect to this also, A Limited will be having certain internal controls in order to ensure that the quality of the product is maintained, okay, in order to ensure that all the ingredients are properly, used. So, with respect to this manufacturing activity that A Limited is providing, with respect to this also, there will be internal controls that A Limited will be maintaining. Now, if in case auditor has been appointed to provide assurance on these type of internal controls which are related to the services that service organization is providing, which are not having any direct impact on the financial statements of the user entity, then for such type of engagement, SAE 3402 is not applicable. Hope that is clear. So this is the background of this standard and a linking of SA 402 and SA E 3402. If you see, Scope of SAE 3402 applies when service organization is responsible for or able to make assertion about suitable design of controls. It does not deal with engagement to report only on operation of controls as described in the service organization. Okay, this SAE 3402 is not applicable with respect to the engagement where auditor is appointed to provide assurance only on the controls that are there at the service organization with respect to its own activities. Okay, which is not having any relation with respect to the service that the service organization is providing. With respect to those engagement, SAE 3402 is not applicable. And also to report only on controls at service organization other than related to those services that are related to user entities financial reporting. Okay, with respect to those services that the service organization is providing which will not have any impact on the financial statements of the user entity. Okay, with respect to those services, if at all any internal controls are there, and if auditor has been appointed to provide assurance on those types of internal controls, then for that type of engagement SAE 3402 is not applicable. Hope that is clear. Next, objectives of the service auditor. What are the objectives of the service auditor? Whenever you have been appointed to provide assurance on the controls of the service organization, your objective will be to obtain reasonable assurance, to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence regarding whether service organization description of system fairly presents the system as designed and implemented. Okay, in the service organization, a system, a process with respect to internal controls with respect to service that it is providing will be designed and implemented, whether that has been fairly presented in the description of the system that the service organization prepared. Okay, it should not be the case where the actual system is different from the description that is given in the description of the system, because this description of the system will be shared with the user entity and user entity will rely on this description of the system. So the duty of the service auditor is to check, is to obtain reasonable assurance that the system that is actually present is fairly presented in the description of the system. That is the first objective. Next, controls related to control objectives are suitably designed as stated in the description of the system. See, in the description of the system there will be various control objectives. What are control objectives? Let me give you an example. Let's say having user id and password. Okay, giving user id and password to each employee is a control. What is the control objective of implementing this control? In order to ensure that unauthorized access to data will not take place. So the description of the system, it will be having various control objectives. For each of the control objective there will be a control that will be designed, whether such control is properly designed and implemented or not. With respect to that, the service auditor has to obtain reasonable assurance. And controls operated effectively to achieve control objective, whether such controls that have been designed and implemented at the service organization are operating effectively to achieve the control objective or not. Even with respect to this, the service auditor will obtain reasonable assurance. However, with respect to this operating effectiveness of this internal controls, sorry, the service auditor will obtain reasonable assurance with respect to operating effectiveness of the internal controls only if he is giving type 2 report. Okay, in case of type 1 report, the operating effectiveness of the controls will not be checked or will not be discussed by the service auditor. And finally, by verifying all this, the service auditor needs to report on all of the above matters. Hope that is clear. And I have also discussed with you what is meant by description of system. It is basically a document which will be which will contain all the details with respect to the internal controls and the system and the process that the service organization has developed for providing services to the user entity. Next, how to proceed with this engagement. Okay, how to proceed with this engagement? First of all, the service auditor, he needs to comply with all the ethical requirements, all the fundamental principles he needs to comply with. In professional ethics we are having certain ethical requirements now: confidentiality, integrity, objectivity, okay, professional due care, all these uh, ethical requirements the auditor needs to comply. And also even independence should also be complied by the service auditor. Hope that is clear. Compliance with ethical requirements. Next, you need to determine who is those charged with governance in the service organization and who is management in the service organization. Why you need to determine this? Because while performing the audit, you will have to make various inquiries, you will have to make various discussions. So for that aspect, you need to first only determine who is management and who is those charged with governance. So based on that, you can properly communicate with them. And acceptance and changes in the terms of engagement. Before accepting the engagement to provide assurance on internal controls, you need to check whether you are having sufficient capability to discharge this engagement or not. Okay, and also whether the criteria that has been used by the service organization for developing the description of the system is suitable or not. What is meant by criteria? Basically, criteria, you can think it as a benchmark. Let's say for example, financial statements. How you will prepare financial statements? You will prepare financial statements based on a criteria. Criteria means financial reporting framework, that is Ind AS or accounting standards. Based on Ind AS or accounting standards, you will prepare financial statements. So for financial statements, the criteria is Ind AS. In the same way, for the description of the system, there will be certain criteria. So whether the criteria that has been followed by the organization, by the service organization, is suitable for its purpose or not, that you need to check before accepting the engagement. And if in case after accepting the engagement, any change to the terms of engagement has been made by the management of the service organization, then you have to check whether such proposed change is reasonable or not. Only after checking that, you will either accept the change or you will reject the change. And assess suitability of criteria for preparing description of the system. This point I have already explained you. Obtain understanding of the service organization system. You will obtain understanding of the service organization system and determine materiality. Okay, you should also determine materiality, because here you will be verifying the internal controls, you will be testing the internal controls. So you should check if how much deviation is there, then it will become material to the user entity. You should determine materiality. Based on that, you will give your opinion. Okay, and obtain evidence regarding description, design and operating effectiveness of the controls. Okay, you should obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence with respect to description of the system, with respect to operating effectiveness of the system. This operating effectiveness you will obtain only in case you are giving type 2 report. And uh, evidence with respect to design and implementation of the controls. And understand internal audit function. You should also understand internal audit function. If the service organization is having any internal audit function, then what is the scope of that internal audit function? What controls that internal audit function is verifying? Whether internal audit function is verifying only controls with respect to activities of service organization, or it is also verifying the controls with respect to services that the service organization is providing to the user entity. That aspect you need to check. And subsequent events. See, generally this description of system, it will be prepared for a particular period as on a date. Let's say for example, description of the system, it has been prepared as on 31st March of 2023. Okay, from 1st April 2022, for this period description of system is there. Now on this description of system, the service auditor, he will give his assurance report, let's say on 15th of May 2023. Okay, now for the subsequent events that has taken place during this period, okay, the events that has taken place during this period which will have impact on description of the system will be known as subsequent events. So while performing this assurance engagement on internal controls, you should also consider this subsequent events. Next, written representation from the service organization. You should also obtain written representation from the management of the service organization. What will be these written representation related to? First of all, the management, they should reaffirm the assertions that they have made in the description of the system. Okay, in the description of the system, they would have described various controls, various process, various system that they have implemented. Okay, and this will be given to the auditor. That means management is making a assertion to the auditor that whatever is present in description of system is correct only. Like this it has made a assertion na. This is relevant only. Like this it has made a assertion na. Whether that assertions are valid on this date also. Regarding this, reaffirming the assertion that has already been made in description of the system, a written representation has to be given to the auditor. Hope that is clear. Next, provide all information and access that has been agreed to the auditor. Management, they have to give written representation to the auditor that they have provided all the information and they have provided access to all the agreed upon activities to the auditor. Regarding this, a written representation must be given, and also management has to give a written representation that it has disclosed all of the following which is known to it. What are they? Non-compliance with laws and regulation. Okay, all the known non-compliance with laws and regulations have been disclosed to the auditor. We have not hidden any non-compliances which were known to us, and also we have disclosed all the known frauds. We have not hidden any frauds that are known to us. Okay, regarding this, a written representation you need to give. Next, design deficiencies in internal control. If at all management has identified any deficiencies in the designing of internal controls, those have been properly disclosed to the auditor. We have not hidden any of them. Next, instances where controls not operated as described. Okay, if there are any instances wherein the controls have not operated as described in the description of the system, we have disclosed them to the auditor. We have not hidden them. And subsequent events that have significant effect. Okay, if management has identified any subsequent events which management feels that it is having a significant effect on description of the system, we have disclosed them to the auditor. We have not hidden them. Regarding this, written representation must be given. Next, reporting. In the report that the auditor gives, what will be the elements must be there in this report? First of all, as usual, title will be there. Okay, title should clearly indicate that this is a report that is given by independent auditor on the internal controls of the service organization, and there should be address to whom this report is being addressed. And you need to identify the following. First one, service organization's description of system. Management, it would have provided description of the system to the auditor, so auditor need to identify in his report that this description of system has been provided to us. And those parts of service organization's description of system not covered by the service auditor's opinion, if in case service auditor is excluding any of the uh, you know is excluding any of the points, sorry, in case service auditor is not providing opinion on any of the points that are present in the description of the system, then the service auditor, he needs to clearly mention in his report that on these aspects the service auditor is not giving is not giving his opinion. That needs to be clearly identified. Okay, what is out of scope of opinion of the service auditor, that must be clearly mentioned. Next, statement that service auditor not evaluated complementary user entity controls. What are these complementary user entity controls? I have discussed them in SF or not. I'll just remind you. See, this Reliance Industries, it has outsourced payroll activity to service organization. Now, with respect to payroll activities, service organization will maintain certain internal controls. Those are internal controls that are present at the service organization. Now, in order to those internal controls to work effectively, in order to achieve the objective, control objective, even user entity should also maintain certain controls. Let's say, for example, payroll data. Now, the payroll data, it should not be leaked. It should be confidential. That is, unauthorized access must not be given to the payroll data. So with respect to this, service organization is maintaining certain controls. However, even though service organization is maintaining controls, if user entity is not maintaining proper controls, there is a chance that this data might be leaked from the user entity point. Okay, so in order to achieve this control objective of not giving unauthorized access, there should be certain complementary controls that must be present at the user entity level also. So these are known as complementary user entity controls. Now, in case such complementary user entity controls are necessary and the service auditor has not verified those complementary user entity controls, then in the report you need to clearly mention that I am not giving any opinion on the complementary user entity controls that are maintained at the user entity because I am not verifying them. Hope that is clear. In the same way, nature of activities performed by sub-service organization. In some cases, service organization, it will again outsource some of the work to the sub-service organization. In that case, the auditor of service organization, he needs to mention the nature of those services which are performed by the sub-service organization. Next, identify the criteria. I have discussed about criteria with you. So the report should clearly mention the criteria based on which the description of the system has been prepared. Next, the report must contain a statement that service organization is responsible for preparing description of system. Okay, description of system, it will be prepared by management of the service organization. Auditor, he will not prepare description of system. And it is also responsibility of the service organization to provide the services that are covered under the description of system. And also it is responsibility of service organization for stating control objectives. Okay, in the description of the system with respect to services that they are providing, there will be various control objectives. So what will be the control objectives that will be achieved at the service organization? This must be stated by service organization itself. And designing and implementing controls to achieve those control objectives. You have set some controls now, you have set some control objectives now. In order to achieve those control objectives, what controls you will design and what controls you will implement. Even this designing and implementation of controls is also responsibility of service organization only. Next comes responsibility of the auditor. What will be the responsibility of the auditor? State that auditor's responsibility is to express opinion on description of system, design of controls, and operating effectiveness. Okay, operating effectiveness of controls will be dealt only in type 2 report. If you are giving type 1 report, then only deal with description of system and design of controls. Okay, design and implementation of controls, we'll be seeing that here. Okay, service auditor's opinion, we'll see that. Next, statement that this particular engagement has been conducted as per SAE 3402. That is, this standard on assurance engagement to SAE 3402 has been followed for conducting this engagement. You need to clearly mention in the report. And summary of audit procedures that the service auditor has performed, and statement of limitation of control. Now, in the auditor's report, service auditor, he needs to clearly mention that even though service auditor has performed the procedures, there is always a chance that he will not be able to identify all the deviations because of inherent limitations of the procedures that he has performed. So that is known as statement of limitation of controls. And he should also mention that there is a risk of projecting control effectiveness to the future. Now, as on this particular date, I am verifying whether controls are operating effectively or not, and I am giving my assurance. But you cannot project this to the future. Since I am saying that now the controls are operating effectively, you cannot assume that they will also operate effectively next year, because next year, if the processes are changed, if any circumstances are changed, then operating effectiveness will also change. So this risk also is there. You need to mention this in your report. Okay, however, this will be applicable only if you are giving type 2 report, because only in type 2 report you will speak about operating effectiveness of controls. Hope that is clear. Next, service auditor's opinion. How this service auditor's opinion will be there in the audit report? First of all, you need to check whether you are giving type 1 report or type 2 report. If you are giving type 1 report, your opinion will include description fairly presents the system as designed and implemented at the specified date. Okay, you need to provide assurance that the description of the system that the management has provided fairly presents whatever the actual system that the service organization has implemented. Okay, regarding this, you will provide your assurance. Okay, whether the actual system that is there in the service organization has been properly described in the description of the system or not, whether it has been fairly presented in the description of system or not, that you will check and you will provide your assurance. That is the first aspect that will be covered in the type 1 report. And this assurance, it will be as on a particular date. Okay, it will not be for a period. Hope that is clear. In case of type 1 report, you will give assurance as on a specified date. Now, if it is a type 2 report, then the same thing you will give assurance, but instead of as on a specified date, you will give for a specified period. Hope that is clear. Next, second point that we will be dealing. Controls related to control objectives are suitably designed as at a specified date. Okay, now in order to achieve control objectives, there should be controls that has to be designed and implemented. You will provide assurance that the controls that are necessary for the purpose of achieving control objectives has been properly designed as on particular date, as on specified date in the type 1 report. Okay, so specified date only you will provide. The same point for a specified period will be provided in type 2 report. Hope that is clear. So these 2 points will be dealt in type 1 report as on a particular date, and these two same points will be dealt by type 2 report also for a specified period. And type 2 report will also deal with operating effectiveness of the controls for a specified period. See the third point, controls operated effectively throughout the specified period. Just a second. See, controls operated effectively throughout the specified period. This operating effectiveness of the controls will not be dealt in type 1 report. Because why? Generally, at the time of appointing the auditor, service organization, it will fix the scope of the auditor. If in the scope of the auditor, operating effectiveness of controls is also there, then the auditor will give type 2 report. If operating effectiveness of controls is not there in the scope of the auditor, then he will give type 1 report. Hope that is clear. And obviously there will be date, signature and place of signature. By that the audit report will end. Now, in case you are giving type 2 report, you need to report certain additional points. What are those additional points? After your opinion paragraph, you need to include a separate section. Basically type 2 report means what? In the type 2 report, you will also speak about operating effectiveness, whether controls are operating effectively or not. Okay, it is not just sufficient that controls are designed and implemented, they should also operate effectively in order to achieve control objectives. So that aspect of operating effectiveness will be dealt by type 2 report. Now, since this aspect will be additionally dealt in type 2 report, in order to check operating effectiveness, what you will do, you will test the controls. So in type 2 report, you should also mention under separate section describing test of controls performed and results of those tests. Okay, what test of controls you have performed for testing operating effectiveness of controls, and what is the result of those tests. If at all any deviations in the controls have been identified, then you need to mention what is the extent of procedures that you have performed, and how many deviations and what are the nature of deviations that you have identified. See, if deviations are identified, indicate extent of testing that you have performed and number and nature of deviations. And also you need to mention this deviation from controls has to be mentioned in the report even if control objective has been achieved. What is this? Let me explain you. See, first of all, I'll read this. Report deviations even if related control objective was achieved. Let me tell you an example. Now, in an organization, only employees of the organization will be having access to enter into the office. Now, in order to ensure this, each employee will be given a card which he needs to swipe in the mission before entering into the organization. So, this is a control. Okay, swiping the card is a control, and the control objective of this control is to ensure that only authorized people will be entering into the office. That is control objective. Now suddenly on one particular day, this mission, it was not working. So there is a deviation in the control. Even though there is a deviation in the control, in order to achieve the control objective, what the company has done is it has placed a security guard in the entrance, and security guard will allow only authorized people into the organization. So here, even though there is a deviation in the control objective is achieved. Okay, so in this situation also, the auditor in his report, in his type 2 report, he must mention the deviation of the control. Okay, he should not keep silent that even though there is a deviation of control objective is achieved now, so let me not report about this deviation. No, you must report this deviation even though control objective is achieved. Hope that is clear. Next, cases where service auditor's opinion will be modified. When will the service auditor he will modify the opinion? First of all, if the service auditor feels that the description of the system does not fairly presents the actual system, in that case he will modify his opinion. If the service auditor feels that the controls are not properly designed, then also he will are not properly designed, not properly implemented, then also he will modify. Next, in case of type 2 reports, if the controls are not operating effectively, then also he will modify. And finally, if the service auditor is not able to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence, then also he will modify his opinion. Okay, these are the situations in which the service auditor will modify his opinion. Okay, and by this we have completed revision with respect to SAE 300402. And this chart you can download it from the link that I will be providing in the description, and you can also get it from our Telegram channel. And to purchase our classes, you can visit our website lecturepedia.in and you can place your order. Okay, I'll be winding up this class as of now. Take care, bye bye, see you.